Disclaimer, spoiler warnings ahead. If you haven't seen the movie, you're probably gonna end up watching this anyway, so watch at your own risk. Also, I apologize if the quality of the video is pretty bad. This is my first time making an actual review that goes on, that's not like a short or whatever. This is a real first for me, and I had to do a lot of things just to piece this together. This is a take that I've had for a year now, basically. One I've been too scared to confess on this channel, but one I knew I would eventually have to get out on this site no matter how long it would take, given my plans to make more commentary videos like this. Or reviews or whatever, however you want us to call it. So I know I must take a leap of faith here. Maybe you'll at least understand my perspective on this film, and how I interpret it as such compared to other Disney remakes, and why I wish I thought otherwise. Well, okay, that last part might not be touched on as much, but there's a reason for that. So the question stands now that I've watched the movie for a second time just to refresh my memory. Did Disney's 2025 remake, or reboot as I think it should be called, it's less of a remake than How to Train Your Dragon, because, that movie was more of a remake. Of their very first feature-length film really deserved to be seen as this disaster that destroyed the morality of Disney and violated cinema as a whole?
No.
I'm dead serious. I'm not lying to you. This movie is better than K-pop Demon Hunters, despite that movie having slightly better songs, or more memorable ones anyway, and the antagonist department, but I'm not counting the animation because one is an animated movie, and the other is a live-action movie. And I'm about to explain to you why shortly. Don't worry, I still think K-pop Demon Hunters is a good movie. I just think it gets way too much love for its own good, and I need people to just shut up about it for once. It's getting way too much love, and everyone is willing to neglect any and all of its flaws just to glaze the absolute hell out of it. But before we start, I need to reassure everyone that I am not a Disney adult. And that's for the simple reason that I clearly do not support their scummy actions that are the real reason they suck as a company. Albeit not as much as Warner Brothers is nowadays. And before you ask, no, I don't like the whole nostalgia exploiting Disney is doing. Granted, it's at least significantly better than whatever was going on in China, but the issue is that the idea itself doesn't even work. It's something that's been kind of hard to execute. And I should know that, because aside from this movie, all the Disney live-action remakes in the first half of this decade were varying degrees of terrible. Like, Disney should have just stopped. But then again, what really motivated them may as well have been The Lion King banking in over $1 billion, because this box office got really nostalgic over it. And that's what truly caused the downfall of the live-action remakes. That Disney has made, at least. Because before then, there were some well-made sequels, one masterpiece, and several ones that were okay. And then there were two that weren't good, but hey, they weren't really offensive whatsoever. And besides, they were still better than the ones I actually have a bone to pick with. I think I should make a ranking about the live-action remakes at some point in the future. But the focus of today's video is Snow White, and why it's actually on equal footing with the original movie and had more effort, heart, soul put into it than all the other live-action remakes Disney made in the first half of this decade combined. And most importantly, actually higher quality than those. But before we move on, I think it's best we get the elephant out of the room so you don't think I'm just needlessly glazing. So the first reason why this movie is not a 10 out of 10 definitely has to be Gal Gadot. The most obvious flaw, especially to people who hate the movie, and even to people who like the movie. Now look, the writing behind the evil queen in this movie is very good, and it probably builds off an already great villain. I definitely believe that the original evil queen would also be out to, with having higher beauty standards, or for more power or whatever, even though she's a sorceress. She'd probably be wanting to pull a Jafar or whatever. The fact she killed Snow White's father is based off an implication in the original as well. But the issue definitely has to be that Gal's acting is not the best, let's just say. Not the worst acting, not even in the top 10 worst actors of all time. Not super gritty in a bad way, just lame, bland, not trying hard enough if you ask me, or just not very good at all. She feels miscast. But unlike Rachel, who's acting in the writing behind the character of, well, the titular character, more than made up for said miscasting, as well as another thing we will get into shortly, at some point, this is just really lame. It doesn't deliver. I mean, have you seen Galactus Wonder Woman?
Kalel, no!
If I had another real complaint, it would have to be the dwarves' CGI, not the dwarves themselves. They're still just as fun as charming as in the original, and they're very in character from, like, the original one. But in this live-action reboot, the CGI on them is not very appealing, to be honest. You see, the CGI in this movie is very beautiful, but the dwarves are the exception to this. And also, screw you, Peter Dinklage. You fucked up the chance of actual dwarves playing them. And yet, for some reason, an actual dwarf snuck himself in just to prove that Disney is not dwarf-phobic or whatever. If Peter Dinklage didn't say that stuff about dwarves acting or whatever, then Disney wouldn't have to make the CGI for the dwarves. To be honest, this is more of a style complaint. They look so weird in the live-action style. Or maybe it's just that they're not really polished or rendered well. I don't know, despite how accurate they look to the original, I think they're just so off-looking. Also, this doesn't affect anything in the long term, at least with the movie, but Snow White doesn't do much, if any, cleaning and whistle while you work for some stupid reason, even though she did in the original. That was a really stupid change and the only true change I hate. Although, to be fair, she's not being bossy or whatever in there. There's that, she's just seeing you with the dwarves. So, there's that at least. I mean, she's speaking in the same tone as she did in the original, just with different voice or whatever. Well, now that that is out of the way, I think it's time I talk about why I genuinely believe this movie works, where other Disney live-action reboots failed this decade, thus far. And I say reboots because I don't want to call them remakes, considering the existence of Mufasa the Lion King. You see, the original movie doesn't really have much of a story after the titular character starts staying in with the dwarves. It's not a bad thing, to be fair, given how intentionally simple the movie is, plus the fact that it is a very wholesome feel-good movie anyway, so there wasn't really needing for a plot. But the plot here, despite being simple like the original, has more depth given the stakes. It's much more serious, but remains lighthearted for the most part as well. And it makes sense, given said heightened stakes. It's more of a story than the original, and the main reason why it works so well is how tight the story itself is. And it's mostly accurate in terms of the story. And I say mostly accurate due to keeping all, or at the very least most of the more important plot beats. Even though I'm still salty about the whistle while you work complaint from earlier. If you've seen both movies back to back, you might understand very well what main plot beats. The fact that they committed to the poison apple in the remake basically goes to show that they did pay attention and not make it like equally low in Stitch 2025, which we might get into one day. And it's not just that, they kept the huntsman, Snow White going through the dark forest and eventually meeting the dwarves, how she even met the dwarves, and the poison apple, and eventually the kiss that woke her up. This is more of a bit, but I like how they still included the whole mining the dwarves do, for obvious reasons. Thing is the movie has more going on, a longer runtime, and just overall more in general, so it makes sense there are some changes. But I don't mean changes as in heavy replacements or anything like that. No. Only additions. Unlike most of the live-action remakes released this decade, it doesn't wreck the movie entirely or miss the point of the original in some way, or simply suck. If anything, it enhances it, and improves a few things from the original that I had issues with. An example is that at one point, Doc, true to his name, tries to help Jonathan get back to health, and he succeeds. Although it did take a little bit. Also, no! This movie is not a girl boss fest because some of the boys are still actually important to the story, plus there's more actually important men than women. The fact that Doc did literally anything important, and then the movie still has the whole true love's first kiss thing proves that this movie doesn't actually have girl boss energy written all over. And yeah, the alleged girl bossness we will get to in a bit, but it's actually done way better here than other Disney live action remakes. Also, speaking of the whole kiss scene, oh, you thought she wouldn't be saved at all? Well, I guess that is technically true, but she was still saved from unconsciousness, but it's technically true because it wasn't by the prince. So when you really think about it, Rachel was actually right when she said she wouldn't be saved by the prince, but she was still saved anyway, so it's more of a half-truth. So anyways, I think we need to talk about what makes this remake the best out of the Disney live-action remakes, not named Cinderella. And yes, I still believe Cinderella is the best Disney live-action remake. And yeah, I think we can agree on that at least. Okay, so I think I might have people target me on this, but I want to be very honest with my feelings. Now, I really like the original well enough, as she works for what she is. She represents all the good in the world, for her kindness and innocence. And that is still present to this movie, whether you like it or not. The main difference definitely has to be that she is a bit less naive, as she is aware of the evil of her stepmom, Grimhild. Yes, that's the canonical name of the evil queen, I looked it up. That's what I will be calling her for the rest of the video, having seen it up close. Or at the very least more aware than the original, because both versions were wiping the floor at the beginning of the movie due to Grimhild being a serious narcissist, and having Snow White end up having to be like a cleaner. Believe me, here she was much more willing to take on Queen Grimhild somehow. And how this main conflict kicks off remains the same as is, because obviously it should be there, because you know. Snow White in this movie has kept all her characteristics, at the very least in a manner where she has more character. What makes her interesting is that she has more of a fleshed out personality, and it certainly was not as simple as the original. She's more determined, hopeful in the sense of more than just naivety, and not as easily trusting as in the original, at least when she first meets Jonathan and the bandit side characters. And she's also curious about where her father is, given how he's been gone for so many years. The reason this interpretation of Snow White works is because they kept the core traits of what character she did have in the original, and added more to it without losing anything. The most they lost is making her a little less naive, but keep just enough for that obvious poison apple. She's not a big departure from the original version of the character, which leads me into a comparison with some other live-action remakes, but I'll mainly compare her to 2020 Mulan, 2023 Wendy, and 2022 Pinocchio. The reason she's much better written than those three, well, I think it's better I explain on their end. Mulan in the live-action remake got heavily buffed to the point of her being way too gifted for her own good. I refuse to call her Mary Sue because I get serious PTSD whenever I hear that term. Because most of the time, that trope is used on the wrong people, because they don't tick every single box. And I say the wrong people because maybe if they ticked all the boxes for what made a Mary Sue, then yeah, that would make sense. But I have take serious issue with the Mary Sue term in general. Like, I can't call Bella Swan a Mary Sue when she literally spends a good chunk of New Moon putting herself into danger or harmful situations just to see and or hear a hallucination of Edward, and would have died if she wasn't turned into a vampire, all because she was giving birth to her and Edward's CGI baby. And I imagine how painful that was. She's just not that interesting as a character is all. And I can't call Mulan 2020 a Mary Sue for only a couple of reasons. But I don't want to be on this comparison for too long, so let's just say they made her lame and made her too much gifted. 2023 Wendy, on the other hand, they just made a girl boss who saves Peter twice, and makes him look like a bumbling moron, and even says the pixie dust magic belongs to no boy.
You have the boy's magic.
No, this magic belongs to no boy.
I'm sorry, if it wasn't for certain YouTubers, I would say that's the most sexist thing I've ever heard, period. Like, seriously. Although to be fair, this movie adapts the original play rather than being an actual remake of the original movie. So I guess I would explain at least a few changes, even though I still hate the movie. And dear God, what did they do to my boy Pinocchio? They made him closer to being a Gary Stu than Mulan ever was to being a Mary Sue. And here's why. He already knows right from wrong right out of the gate, despite literally barely even existing on this earth in the remake. He barely even existed in the world in the original, but he didn't even know right from wrong that well, because, well, he was literally just born yesterday. Any character flaws he has are removed or have little if no existence because Coincidence or circumstances holding him back? Do you now see why I genuinely believe this to be the worst live-action remake? Okay, back to a good live-action remake. And that very satisfying moment where everyone follows behind her on their way to a coup d'etat, or however it's pronounced, to overthrow Queen Grimhild, it's earned, and it's because of her character as a whole, and because Queen Grimhild is a terrible ruler, meaning Snow White is the true queen. See, Disney, this is how you write a more independent version of one of your female characters. This is the best showcase of it. Yes, even on the live-action remakes that aren't bad. But to be honest, I think I want to get to the thing this movie improves the most from the original, and that is, without a single doubt. Okay, so the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, as important as it is not immune to criticism. And I think my biggest issue has to be that the romance is not that well developed. I still happily take it over after at least. To be honest, I don't like how Snow White just wishes to meet her true love today, and then immediately runs off due to being, very shy, as if she didn't just have that wish. You can't just wish for love. That's one of the 3 genie rules. I like it better when it just happens. Feels more real and natural, Also, the romance in the original movie with the prince is not very well developed. They have one scene together before the kiss, and I don't like that, because they don't even spend that much time together. Although, to be fair to the prince, he was only searching for her when she was gone, not stalking her. Rachel, you did not deserve the hate to eat or to get bullied, but your wording and the way you were talking about how you don't like how the original is, yeah, that was not the best. Truth be told, it's not the worst romance in the movie, but it's not one that's developed for me to consider good. And the prince doesn't even have a character anyway. He just exists. We don't know what he is the prince of. We don't know who he is. He's barely in the movie whatsoever. So I was pleasantly surprised when he was replaced by Jonathan in this movie, who may as well just be his more interesting counterpart. Matter of fact, it is now my headcanon that the prince from the original movie is named Jonathan as well. I mean, he doesn't really have a concrete name in the original, so you can guess why. Also, yes, I know there's Prince Charming from Cinderella, but his name is actually Kit in the live-action remake, and that's what made me consider his name to be Kit. Anyways, one thing I like is that his role is more prominent from his first appearance alone. And let's be real, Queen Grimhild deserved to get a tiny portion of her food roll when you consider how awful she is. And no, I'm not just saying that because Gal Gadot. But you get the sense he is at least mildly trustworthy. And then there must be a reason. But when you meet him again with his friend group that admittedly don't have much of a character, but they're fine, you begin to warm up to them, and him in general, given that there's a charisma to this character, since he isn't hostile to Snow White the second time they meet at all. Editing Game Gadon.900 here. Yes, I know they had snark-to-snark combat, like that one TV Tropes page, but it wasn't too far and it wasn't too mean, it was just snark. Plus, Jonathan did save Snow White from taking an arrow, so I guess there was only really a limitation to how much snark you can do before it gets too jerky and, too mean.
Hey, you! This is dangerous! It's irresponsible! What happens if kids start trying this?
Kids, don't use Formula One race cars to chase Hedgehog.
Rather just being a dude who sings about Snow White's princess problems, which, yeah, let's be honest, said princess problems do exist, especially when you consider a certain queen voiced by Gal Gadot. Oh, and he and Snow White actually have a better developed romance, mainly due to the obvious of having more than just one scene together before that kiss. And the song they sing together after he's told it was so sweet. It actually feels so wholesome. The two actually have great chemistry together due to having actual human interactions, and they feel a little realistic. And it is fitting, it is as realistic as you can possibly be, because since Jonathan's the guy who leads a group of misfits, and Snow White is a princess whose stepmother wants her dead just for being prettier, and is out of the castle for the first time in allegedly several years. Also, I hope Snow White in the remake isn't only 14 like she is in the original. The magic mirror was really creepy for saying she was the fairest of them all, even though she was 14. Yeah, that's another issue with the original about her canon age. because at the very least, mildly implied to be underage. Yeah, I compare that to Ariel or Aurora, who at the very least were 16 in their movies, making them getting married pretty early to be much less questionable. And Cinderella, last I checked, she's not underage by the time she reached the ball. I apologize if I was being quite critical or overthinking this, because no one else seems to want to, because they want to make the live-action remakes look as bad as possible, when most of them are just varying degrees of not great is enough. To be honest, 2025 Snow White looks a few years older than the original. 6 years is what I think at the very most. Who knows? So that checks out. Also, this is going to be a small bit, but the dungeon and skating scenes were well executed, and done in a way where they don't overstay their welcome. They're pretty brief, and they are pretty well done writing and all that stuff. Alright, so I alluded to earlier how I thought this movie was going to suck. But if we're going to be completely and utterly honest with you, the whole reason I hated the fact that this movie turned out to be amazing and didn't turn out to be like the rest of the Disney live-action remakes post-Lion King 2019, the thing is, the fact that they expanded on so much, the fact that they give, like, Snow White and the Evil Queen, like, more scenes to justify the grand finale where the Evil Queen gets sucked into the mirror, yeah. All of that, I genuinely wish that wasn't the case. I wish it was this girl boss fest that everyone made it out to be, instead of just Snow White being a badass pacifist without having to be all girl bossy. And my first reaction upon finishing the movie in theaters, my first reaction was, this is so wrong. They were so wrong. The entire internet genuinely thinks that this movie is like the worst thing ever. But if you actually think about it and think about what it expands on and does right, that's when you realize that, hey, maybe we should have actually been fair to it. Like, I hope you can at the very least, even if you hate this movie, still, actually be fair to it. Because that's kind of what I want from everyone. Because the thing is, I really hate how the internet is nowadays with, like, certain people out there constantly complaining about literally everything. Like, seriously. We have Star Wars fans, My Hero fans, and Friday Night Funkin' fans. Fans of any sort in any fan base where no matter how many good fans there are that outnumber them, they're always going to be, outvoiced by the stupid people. And this is why I hate Twitter. They're always like this. And thing is, maybe in another universe this movie would have been as awful as everyone said it was. But, yeah, that's just me. Like, I'm very sure that there are people out there who maybe they have a live-action remake that they actually like, but everyone else hates. And who knows? I'm going to be curious to hear what you have to say about that. And, yeah, that's really all I have to say. To be honest, if this was really as bad as everyone said it was, then maybe I could have just not made this video. But if you want me to make a full expansion on this video at some point in the future, I might gladly do that. I still have a bit to say. My opinion of this movie is a mostly positive one. A 9 out of 10. Would have been a 10 out of 10 if it was a few things being fixed, but I already said my piece about what the issues were. Otherwise, this is the one, count them, one Disney live-action remake I can confidently say is actually the original, but, well, I wouldn't say better than the original, but that's only because this movie and the original are equal in terms of quality. This avoids the pitfalls that the other live-action remakes post-2019 have had. Those being changes that either make itself inferior to the original, or just suck even as its own movie. This comes from, across kind of like a standalone movie. One that isn't some inferior or destruction to the original. It's a worthy modern retelling that tells its own spin on the classic fairy tale, keeping the same while also having some differences that don't feel super detached from the original one way or the other. Okay, so editing game Godon 900 here, but one of those changes is the fact that fair has a double meaning, which, to be fair, get it? The word fair was never really just the one meaning anyway. It also feels more like an original take than a live-action remake due to what it adds, basically holding up outside of the adaptation category. If it wasn't for this movie, I wouldn't be fair to even the worst Disney live-action remakes. I really wish this was the movie that gave Disney $1 billion and Lilo & Stitch 2025 was the one that made them lose a lot of money. And I know I'm not the only one who actually understands this movie. You might be surprised to hear that there are people out there who actually like this, even if they're not the most vocal on the internet. God, I wish they were. Hopefully you can walk from this video, at the very least knowing that this movie is the definition of why we should be fair to all movies even if they're absolute dog poop. Except for Cuties, that shit can go burn in hell where it belongs. And this movie is an example of why Disney, for all their serious faults, still releases good stuff every now and then, no matter how bad what the movies they also release are. And yeah, that was my brief review of what truly makes the movie. Be sure to hype this video up and spread it all around. I'm GameGadon800, and I'll see you all in the next commentary, let alone the rest of my channel. Be sure to check out my quote if you want to see all my cool story stuff, where I'll mainly be. And most of all, stay funky. And also please subscribe, I would really appreciate it.